I don't think people understand the critical role glucose plays in our bodies. Our bodies are incredible machines, constantly working to keep us alive and functioning. Every second, countless processes are happening inside us, from the beating of our hearts to the firing of neurons in our brains. These processes require energy, and that energy comes from the food we consume. Like any machine, our bodies need fuel to operate. This fuel is essential for maintaining our daily activities, whether it's walking, thinking, or even sleeping. Without the right kind of fuel, our bodies wouldn't be able to perform these tasks efficiently. This fuel comes from the food we eat, broken down into a simple sugar called glucose. When we consume carbohydrates, they are digested and converted into glucose, which then enters our bloodstream. This glucose is transported to our cells, where it is used to produce energy. Glucose is the primary energy source for all cells in our body, from the neurons firing in our brains to the muscles powering our movements. It is crucial for brain function, muscle contraction, and even the functioning of our organs. Without glucose, our cells would be unable to perform their essential tasks. Even cancer cells, though dysfunctional, rely on glucose for their growth and survival. These cells have a high demand for glucose because they are constantly dividing and growing. This makes glucose a critical component in the study of cancer and its treatment. Think of glucose as the gasoline that powers our cells' engines. Just as a car needs gasoline to run, our cells need glucose to function. Without it, our cells would come to a halt, unable to perform their necessary functions. Without it, our cells wouldn't be able to perform their essential tasks. This would lead to a breakdown in bodily functions, affecting everything from our ability to think clearly to our physical strength and endurance. Just as a car can't run without fuel, our bodies can't function without glucose. It's a fundamental principle of biology that applies to all living organisms. Whether we're eating a meal or engaging in physical activity, glucose is constantly being used to keep our bodies running smoothly. This basic biological principle applies to all cells, including those that have become cancerous. Cancer cells, like all cells, need glucose to survive. However, their way of processing glucose is different from that of healthy cells. However, the way cancer cells process glucose differs from healthy cells, a phenomenon known as the Warburg Effect. This effect describes how cancer cells prefer to produce energy through a less efficient process called glycolysis, even when oxygen is available. Understanding this difference is key to dispelling the myth that sugar directly feeds cancer. While it's true that cancer cells use glucose, they don't necessarily use more of it than healthy cells. The difference lies in how they use it. While it's true that cancer cells use glucose, they don't necessarily use more of it than healthy cells. The key difference is in the metabolic pathways they employ. Cancer cells rely heavily on glycolysis, which is less efficient but allows them to thrive in low oxygen environments. The way cancer cells utilize glucose is inefficient, producing less energy and more waste products like lactic acid. This inefficiency is a hallmark of cancer metabolism and contributes to the aggressive nature of the disease. This metabolic shift is a hallmark of cancer and a focus of ongoing research. Scientists are studying how these changes in metabolism can be targeted to develop new treatments. By understanding the unique metabolic needs of cancer cells, researchers hope to find ways to disrupt their growth. Scientists are exploring ways to exploit this difference to develop targeted cancer therapies. By focusing on the unique metabolic pathways of cancer cells, new treatments can be designed to specifically target and kill cancer cells while sparing healthy ones. This approach holds great promise for the future of cancer treatment. Before we go any further, let's take a quick pause. Are you enjoying this video so far? Help us reach more people by giving this video a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends and family. Your support makes a difference. If you're passionate about learning how to take control of your health and make informed choices, hit the subscribe button and join our holistic cancer care community. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos. In the 1920s, German scientist Otto Warburg observed a peculiar characteristic of cancer cells. He noticed that these cells exhibited a unique way of generating energy, which was quite different from normal, healthy cells. They tend to favor a less efficient method of energy production, even when oxygen is abundant. This was a surprising discovery because under normal circumstances, cells prefer the more efficient aerobic respiration. This phenomenon, now known as the Warburg Effect, distinguishes cancer cells from their healthy counterparts. The Warburg Effect is characterized by an increased rate of glucose uptake and fermentation of glucose to lactate, even in the presence of sufficient oxygen. Normal cells typically break down glucose through a process called aerobic respiration, which requires oxygen and yields a high amount of energy. This process takes place in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and is highly efficient. Cancer cells, however, often rely more heavily on anaerobic respiration, a less efficient process that occurs without oxygen and produces lactic acid as a byproduct. This method of energy production is much less efficient, yielding only a fraction of the energy compared to aerobic respiration. The reasons behind the Warburg effect are complex and still not fully understood. Researchers have been delving into the molecular and genetic factors that drive this metabolic shift, trying to uncover the underlying mechanisms. One theory suggests that this metabolic shift provides cancer cells with a survival advantage in the often oxygen-deprived environment of a tumor. Tumors can create hypoxic conditions where oxygen levels are low, making anaerobic respiration a more viable option for energy production. Another theory proposes that it helps cancer cells rapidly divide and grow, even when oxygen is scarce. The high rate of glucose consumption and lactate production may support the biosynthetic and energetic demands of rapid cell proliferation. The Warburg effect has significant implications for cancer research. Understanding this metabolic peculiarity opens up new avenues for developing targeted therapies that can disrupt the energy production pathways specific to cancer cells. Scientists are investigating ways to target this metabolic difference to develop new treatments. By inhibiting the pathways that cancer cells rely on for energy, it may be possible to selectively kill cancer cells without harming normal cells. By understanding how cancer cells fuel their growth, we can potentially find ways to cut off their energy supply and halt their progression. This could lead to more effective treatments and improved outcomes for patients battling cancer. The relationship between sugar and cancer is often misunderstood by many people. While it's true that all cells, including cancer cells, use glucose for energy, this does not mean that eating sugar directly causes cancer in the body. The human body is far more complex than that simple explanation. The misconception that sugar feeds cancer stems from a simplification of a complex biological process. While limiting added sugars is generally advisable for overall health and well-being, eliminating sugar entirely will not starve cancer cells in the body. This is because our bodies can produce glucose from various sources, including carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The claim that sugar alone causes cancer is simply not supported by scientific evidence. Cancer arises from a complex interplay of genetic and environmental factors, and attributing it solely to sugar consumption is a gross oversimplification of the issue. A balanced perspective is crucial when navigating the often conflicting information surrounding diet and disease. The idea of starving cancer by eliminating sugar is appealing but ultimately flawed. This concept has gained traction because it seems logical at first glance. After all, cancer cells do consume more glucose than normal cells, leading many to believe that cutting off their sugar supply could inhibit their growth. While it's true that cancer cells have a heightened demand for glucose, the reality is far more complex. Cancer cells are highly adaptable and can find alternative ways to fuel their growth. Completely cutting off their supply is not a realistic or effective strategy. Our bodies are designed to maintain a steady supply of glucose, even when dietary intake is low. Our bodies possess remarkable adaptability and resilience. They can produce glucose from various sources, ensuring that our cells, including cancer cells, continue to receive the energy they need. Glucose can be derived from carbohydrates, proteins, and even fats. This metabolic flexibility makes it nearly impossible to starve cancer cells by simply eliminating sugar from the diet. Even in the absence of dietary sugar, our bodies can still produce glucose through various metabolic pathways. When we consume carbohydrates, our bodies break them down into glucose, which is then used as a primary energy source. However, if carbohydrates are scarce, our bodies have backup mechanisms to ensure a continuous supply of glucose. Our bodies can turn to stored glycogen, a form of glucose stored in the liver and muscles, to provide energy during times of need. Glycogen can be quickly mobilized to maintain blood glucose levels, especially during physical activity or fasting. If glycogen stores are depleted, our bodies can even create glucose from protein and fat through a process called gluconeogenesis. This process ensures that our cells, including cancer cells, continue to receive the glucose they need to function. Through gluconeogenesis, the body can convert non-carbohydrate sources into glucose, further complicating the idea of starving cancer cells by cutting out sugar. Therefore, even if you were to eliminate all sugar from your diet, your body would continue to supply glucose to your cells, including cancer cells. The notion that you can effectively starve cancer by cutting out sugar is simply not supported by scientific evidence. Instead, a balanced diet and healthy lifestyle are more effective strategies for overall well-being. The idea of eliminating sugar to combat cancer oversimplifies a complex issue and can lead to unnecessary dietary restrictions and stress. It's crucial to rely on scientific evidence and consult healthcare professionals when making dietary choices, especially when dealing with serious conditions like cancer.